Hey, I'm Al Stein, and today let's make Speed Garage. I'll cover everything from how to build the drums, the bass, cover the pads and the chords, and how to use vocal samples as well. We'll also cover some buses, routing, and mixing. First, let's start with the drums. When I'm starting a track, I'll always lay down the kick first. We have this kick bus here that has two kick sounds routing into this one kick bus. We have big kick, which is doing the sub, and we have a top kick. We have another kick sample here, but we've taken out all the lows, so it's just playing the top end. I like to split up my kick because it gives me more control in the sound. I can choose the attack that I want. You can process the low end separately from the high end. So you can just have a 4 on the floor playing like this. But I like to add a couple extra embellishments, a couple extra accents to give it some more variation. It also makes it a little more interesting. You can see I've drawn in these extra kick hits here, and they're not just playing straight. I'll show you the difference here. As opposed to here, when I've quantized it to a swing, you can press Q to quantize. It's moved the kick hit over. In terms of processing this kick, there's actually not much that I've done. There's some distortion, there's overdrive here, and it's also being clipped a bit. What a clipper does is it shaves off the top of the transient, which gives you more headroom. And you want to be careful with this because it can introduce some distortion. So you just got to use your ears and make sure you don't overdo it. The red part of this waveform here is actually the part that's being cut off. And if I reduce the ceiling, shave off more of that transient, but then I'll also introduce some distortion. So it depends. If you want to go for that sort of sound, you can. In terms of dance music, clippers are pretty important because it increases headroom, which leads to a louder mix. Next, we have the snare here. For my snare, I like to combine multiple samples. You can drag in any snare sample onto the track, and it'll open up Quick Sampler. What I've done is I've routed multiple samples into this bus here, so then I can play with the levels of each sample to get the sound that I want. I've also layered that snare with a real clap here. Okay, moving on to the hi-hats. My approach to the hi-hats are the same as the kick, where I'll play in the basic pattern of the syncopated hi-hats, but then I'll put in these extra couple embellishments that are also being quantized to swing D. Just add a little bit more groove and kind of adding to that UKG pattern. And couple with this open hi-hat groove here. Once I have a pretty basic drum groove going, I want to add some more texture to it. And it's great to add some percussion, some top loops, some shakers as well. So I added this shaker here. And on this shaker track here, I have Transient Master. And what that's doing is it's kind of tightening it up a little bit. You can hear without it, the shaker hits have a lot more sustain. I didn't really want it to be kind of taking up that much space, so you can just reduce the sustain here. Something to note about using loops in conjunction with things you've played in is that they don't always mesh well. The loops will have their own groove, they'll have their own swing. We're already using that 16th note swing D algorithm, so we can apply that to the loops that we're bringing in. Having the same swing as your other elements helps the cohesion and it actually sounding like it's coming from the same place. Then I've added this other top loop just to give it more texture. It's the same idea where I've applied that swing algorithm to this top loop as well. And the final element of the drum groove is I wanted to add some percussion. Lately, I've been using this African kit that just comes stock with Logic. When approaching a percussion, I'll either look for a percussion loop that I have somewhere in my library or on Splice, but sometimes I want to just play it in myself. I'll just sit there with the keyboard and just groove out and play some percussion. I think this is a bit more unconventional for this genre, but I think it sounds good and it added some textures underneath. So all of these elements I've routed into this drum bus here. And the way you can do that is you can highlight all the elements and on your keyboard press Shift Command D, and that will route it into a track stack here. So any plugin that we put here on this track stack, all of the tracks underneath within the track stack will be affected by it. It's good to process all the drums together to kind of help with that cohesion, or what people say, gluing them together. And the idea with this is that as if all of the parts of a drum kit are being routed through one mixing console or outboard gear. So firstly, we have a bus compressor here. This is the SSL bus compressor. And it's not really doing that much, really just reacting to the kick. And when the kick and the clap plays it the same. Slow attack, fast release, pretty standard for bus compression. Next, we have tape saturation here. So this is like all of those elements are being routed through one tape machine. And what that's doing is it's emulating that kind of natural compression that running through a tape machine used to do back in the day. And to me, what I hear is it's adding a little more punch to the kick, a little more power to the low end. Next, that's going into the Oxford inflator. Next, it's going into Saturn here, doing some more saturation, clean tube saturation. And this is really just emulating all of the drums going through analog gear that utilizes those tubes. And lastly, it's going into a clipper. Again, just increasing headroom so we have more space for the other elements. And lastly, what I've done is I've routed this drum bus to another bus, bus 30, which has this small drums preset on it. And the idea by routing all of the drums to a reverb is that I want to put those drums in a space. I want it to sound like played all together in one room. Before going into the reverb, I've cut off all the low end and all the high end here. When you have reverb with a lot of low end, it can create issues in terms of muddying up the low end of the whole track. So this bus I've put on pre-fader, and you can see here that the reverb is quite low. It's just giving you a little bit of those reflections to kind of make you feel like the drums are coming from the same space. Okay, let's move on to the pads. So I knew that when I was making this track, I kind of wanted to have a little bit of that kind of vintage vibe to it. I wanted to kind of have that classic chord stab. So I found this preset here. So we're taking out the low end, we're adding a bunch of high end here, some reverb, and some delay. For these chords, you can see that there's only one MIDI note being played for each chord. There's not a bunch of MIDI notes creating the chord. I've used this in a bunch of my songs. It's one of my favorite features of Logic, and it's this chord trigger here. And what I like with this one is that you can play one note on the keyboard, playing an entire chord. So what I'll usually do is when I'll have the drum groove, I'll pull this up and kind of jam out with it a little bit. Again, these are being quantized to that algorithm swing D. So it's kind of working together in conjunction with all the other elements that we've played so far. So that chord is being layered with another Yuhi synth, which is doing a lot of the top end. Pretty dry, but all it's really doing is adding that extra top end to the chords that we had previously. And finally, I've layered that with a Juno. So altogether, that sounds like this. So that sounds cool. I like that main groove. But to kind of not keep it so stagnant, I like to layer it with a bunch of other elements as well. So here we have another Juno that's playing this. Quite slow attack, so it swells into it. And then we also have this Rhodes that's quite distorted. Later on in the track, another unconventional element of UKG, I've added a synth solo. So this is Keyscape Rhodes on this setting here. And this I would have just played in. Sat there jamming and just played that in. All right, let's move on to the bass there. So when I approach the bass, I do it the same way I would the kick. I have it split up, the low end of the bass and the high end of the bass. Both of these bass lines are being played out of Monarch here. The low end is this defined square patch that I would have gone in and changed the attack and the decay. The top bass is also playing from Monarch, this A-Train preset, but again, I would have gone in and changed all of the settings here to kind of get the sound that I want. And the top end is just taking out all of the lows here and just adding that extra texture to the bass. So there's actually not much on these channels here because I've routed them into the bass bus that is being all processed together. So there's some distortion on there, some saturation, but this here is the most important part. This low end part is being sidechained to the kick. So just these frequencies are being taken out when the kick plays. So it's like sidechain compression, but we're using dynamic EQ to take out that low end just when the kick happens. Now I am using sidechain compression in conjunction with that to just create more space for the kick. But the sidechain compression is only at 65%, so you can hear what that sounds like if we turn it up all the way. So it's losing majority of that attack of the bass. So I wanted to create more space for the kick, but not take away the important part of the bass. So that sidechain compression in conjunction with this dynamic EQ is creating that space in the low end for the kick. Later on in the bass line here, we have some automation like the cutoff, as well as this RC20 that's adding some distortion and a bit crusher. So I didn't want the bass to just sound like it's being looped over and over. So you just add some of these extra textures to kind of give it movement, as well as making it sound less repetitive, like it's being played on a loop. So that Monarch plays for the first half of the song, and for the second half of the song, we just have this respace. And this respace is just this Serum preset here, and that sounds like this. And again, that respace is being routed into this bass bus. So all of those plugins we talked about before are being applied to that respace as well. And the last thing we're going to talk about are the vocals. I came across this sample on Slice. It was absolutely ridiculous. It's just two people arguing.
I know my wife, I'll shut you down. And I'm not going to shut up. I will not be quiet. I have the energy for it.
After I heard that, I knew immediately that I would need to use that for a song. So when I heard that sample, it needed a bit of work to be done there. Those people are yelling. There's a lot of background noise. So first we have some compression here.
I know my wife, I'll shut you down.
These two wave plugins are doing a lot of work to decrease the reverb as well as a lot of the background noise. So here's without it.
I know my wife, I'll shut you down. And I'm not going to shut up.
And here's with it.
I know my wife, I'll shut you down. And I'm not going to shut up.
So it's like magic. It's taken away a lot of that noise, a lot of the reverb. So then we have to add in our own reverb.
I know my wife, I'll shut you down.
This sample is being routed to this delay track here that I've automated just the end of the phrase.
I have the energy for it.
And I've used this part as the intro to the song.
I know my wife, I'll shut you down. And I'm not going to shut up. I will not be quiet. I have the energy for it.
I've also added these other vocal samples here. I chopped up that sample of the people arguing and placed them throughout the song, kind of spaces where the song has a lower point leading into the next section. Alright, finally I've added this vinyl crackle here. It's literally just that playing throughout the song. And what I wanted to do is just make it sound like it's playing from a vinyl. And on the vinyl, I've taken away some lows and some highs. Okay, let's go to the master chain. Here's the master chain here. First things first is I'm taking away all of the sides just in the low end. What that's doing there is making the bass mono. Everything under 100 hertz is being taken away. So you can hear some of the sides left over from some of the synths there. And just to clean up the low end there to make everything below 100 hertz mono. Then it's going into this compressor. Barely taking away half a dB. Then again into the Oxford inflator. Next it's going into a multiband compressor. First I tried it out with this Pro MB. I didn't like the sound of it. So I have this old Logic multipressor that everything is being bypassed. Is just everything below 100 hertz that's being just compressing just the low end. It's really just some of the bass and the kick coming together and compressing that a tiny, tiny bit. Then again into this clipper. Not doing a whole lot, just increasing the headroom very slightly. And lastly, into the limiter, that's doing a lot of the work. It's quite loud there at around -5.5 LUFS. All right, I think we covered everything there. If you're feeling this track, this one is coming out October 17th. It's called The Disrespect. If you made it this far in the video, write in the comments, what's your favorite plugin that no one uses? I want to know those underrated plugins. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Thanks for watching.